What's happening everyone, my name is Alex and welcome back to a new review. For today I have one of the cheapest action cameras that can record in real 4K. So this right here, it's called the eDiscovery and you can find it for about $60. Now, since this is cheaper than most cameras that can record in real 4K, of course there are some downsides to it, but I will cover everything throughout this video. So we are gonna start with the box. So the camera comes in a good looking box, but this is a very small box and inside we only find the camera, we find the user manual and the cable. So there is no waterproof case that comes with the camera. And if you're planning to buy a waterproof case, you're gonna have to spend somewhere between $15 and $20. Now I did try the waterproof case that comes with the E4K Plus and that one fits as well. So the eDiscovery is using the A9SE100 processor and the Sony IMX179 image sensor with a field of view of 145 degrees. Now on paper this sounds good, but the camera can only record in 4K at 20 frames per second or 1440 at 30 frames per second or 1080p at 60 frames per second. So yes, the camera can record in 4K, but recording at 20 frames per second feels kind of choppy, at least in my opinion, and it's not for me for sure. And I found the recordings that I've done in 1440 at 30 frames per second much better looking, so I do recommend that you use that instead of the 4K at 20 frames per second. Alright, so the camera itself is mostly made out of plastic and it looks very similar to all the other E-action cameras that we've seen in the past. So the E4K Plus, the E-Lite or the E4K. On the front we have the E brand and an LED and we also have the lens. And those LEDs can also be turned off from the software. So if you don't want to see any of those LEDs, you can just turn them on or off. At the top we have the only button available, we have the holes for the speaker and we also have the holes for the microphone. And since we are talking about the microphone, we might as well check out some sample recordings that I've done so you can hear how the microphone sounds. What's happening everyone, this is our first microphone test with the eDiscovery action camera. As you can probably tell, I'm holding the camera in my hand and I'm also driving. The windows are closed, so you shouldn't be able to hear much aside from my voice. Oh, and I'm recording in 4K at 20 frames per second at the moment. Another day, another microphone test. So I'm currently recording with the eDiscovery action camera and I'm recording in 1440 at 30 frames per second. As you can probably see, I am inside the house, so there is no other noise aside from my voice. So this is how the microphone sounds. And as you've seen and heard, the microphone doesn't sound bad, but it's badly out of sync. And I mean, you can fix that whenever you're editing a video, but it's something to keep in mind. Alright, going back to the camera and looking on the right hand side there, you're gonna find the micro USB charging port and the slot for the SD card. I tried a couple of 64 gig SD cards with this action camera and these are basically the same SD cards that I tried with pretty much any action camera and they both work fine. And I'm gonna leave some links in the video's description just in case you wanna check them out. Charging the camera is done through that micro USB port on the side and charging the camera from 0 to 100 is done in just under 2 hours. Now the good thing about this camera is the fact that it can be charged whenever it's recording and that's important mostly if you're doing time lapses. And that means that you can attach a power bank to this camera and continue recording and you're not gonna be running out of power anytime soon. And talking about time lapses, the camera can do time lapses with the press of a button and this is a quick example of a time lapse that I've done with this camera recording in 4K. And moving to the bottom of the camera, there we have a little plastic door that covers the 900 mAh battery. So I was able to record for about 55 minutes at 4K at 20 frames per second or about an hour and 10 minutes recording at 1080p at 60 frames per second. Surprisingly enough, on the back of the camera we have a 2-inch touchscreen and that's not something that we usually see for cheaper action cameras. Now the screen's brightness can also be adjusted and you can see the screen good enough whenever you're outside in direct sunlight, and once again that's not something that we usually see for cheaper action cameras. The eDiscovery can also make a Wi-Fi network and can be controlled right from your smartphone. Of course, you're gonna have to download an app on your smartphone and the app can be found in the Google Play Store or the iOS Store. So this works for Android and iPhones. Once connected, you can see everything that the camera sees right from your smartphone, and this works good up to 10 meters away from the camera. Of course, you have access to all the settings for the camera and you can even see whatever you have recorded in the past on the action camera, so very useful feature. Another downside to this action camera would be the fact that we don't have any type of image stabilization, and that means that every time you're walking your footage is gonna look shaky. But that's kind of expected for a camera this cheap. And next we're gonna check out some video recordings that I've done during the day and some of them were recorded in 4K at 20 frames per second, some at 1440 at 30 frames per second and of course 1080p at 60 frames per second. And as you've seen for yourself, the video quality is quite good, mostly if we take into consideration the price of the camera. Now, of course, it sucks that we don't have any type of image stabilization because all the footage is kind of shaky, but that's the case with all cheaper action cameras. The 4K at 20 frames per second looks way too choppy to be used, but if you're recording in 40 at 30 frames per second, I think it looks more than okay. And next we're gonna check out some video recordings that I've done at nighttime. And as you've seen for yourself, the nighttime recordings aren't horrible and kind of on par with all the other cheaper action cameras that we've seen in the past, but definitely not the best footage out there. But again, the camera is only $60, so you can't really expect that much from it. As for the picture taking mode, of course the pictures look good as long as you have plenty of light, and as soon as you don't have enough light, the pictures become kind of grainy and blurry. But once again, that's the case with a lot of cheaper action cameras. Using the camera, it's very simple. So if you swipe left or right on the touchscreen on the back of the camera, you can switch in between the picture taking mode or the video taking mode, and the screen sensitivity is also decent, so no complaints about that. If you swipe down, you get to access like a quick toggle mode, and there you can turn on or off the Wi-Fi, or you can even turn on or off the camera. So very simple to use. And on the main screen there we have a little icon for the settings menu. The settings menu is also divided into two sections. So you have the general settings menu, and then we have the video settings menu and the picture settings menu. For the general one, you can change the language, you can change the Wi-Fi network, you can format the SD card, you can turn on or off those LEDs that we have on the front and at the top of the camera, and you can also change the screen's brightness. So definitely a lot of options for the general settings menu. And for the video settings menu, of course, we have more video related settings. So you can change the resolution. As I said before, you can record in 4K at 20 frames per second. You can do 1440 at 30 frames per second, 1080p at 60 or 30 frames per second, and so on. You can also turn on or off the microphone. So it really depends what you're looking for, but we definitely have plenty of settings in there. And it's time to conclude this video. So for $60, I believe that this camera offers pretty good value because we don't usually get these features for about $60. Now, me personally, I need image stabilization and at least 30 frames per second whenever I'm recording, but everyone has a different budget and everyone has different expectations. So if you're fine with recording at 1440 at 30 frames per second and you don't really care for that image stabilization, this could be a good camera. Alright guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did like it, press that like button. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.